Hey, it's Fernando here, and I am on vacation, but I thought I'd do a real quick reply to John Paul Dorn in a comment that he left on my last video. I found very strange. He was asking about equality is all well and good, but what about these other inequalities? What about equality of guilt? Um, like I said, that struck me as very odd. And I thought that I would explain why, where um, for John Paul Dorn, I think you're off in your own world on this subject. There is a spectrum between pure existence and pure ideal. In between, you have the individual and society. Now, on one end, we have the conditions, the circumstances in which we find ourselves, which I will refer to as modalities. Modalities of self include your sex at birth, your socioeconomic status, physical characteristics like height. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have an ideal that people should not be judged. People should not experience societal pressure or stress because of those modalities. Now, if you take one step away from conditional modalities toward the world of the pure ideal, the first thing you'll encounter is feelings. Guilt, for example, is a feeling. Fear, rage, all these things that you're talking about in your videos that women experience are not modalities of being women. They are one step away from the pure being toward the pure ideal. Feelings are things that we experience that cause us to take action, but feelings are themselves caused by our actions, by our circumstances and experiences. We can apply will to affect our feelings, but our feelings also affect what we can and will be willing to apply our will to. So once we get to the realm of feelings, once we're that far away from being, from issues of an existential nature, we are now in a kind of interactive environment where we have to take responsibility for things that are not entirely in our control. We can take responsibility for whether or not we feel guilt, whether or not we feel rage or fear. But we can't take responsibility for things like, I don't know, being men. That is simply not in our control. At least not for being born men, not for existing as men. When we get farther along, we encounter constructs. We have personal, moral, ethical constructs, and we also have social constructs. And equality is not a personal construct. It is something that, by definition, is social. It is how people, when they relate, when they interrelate, deal with each other. And it's the question of what is it we are judging each other for? What standard are we holding each other to? Is it a standard on modalities? Is it a standard on feeling? Is it a standard on action? And that's the problem that I think so many of us have had with what you've said in your videos, explicitly saying women should have feelings toward men, whether or not those are based on any kind of action, just based on the pure modality of them being men, justified by the feelings of those women. But this is what's really important here. This is what's critical. Equality still isn't an ideal. We're only at the level of social construct. We are not yet at the level of abstract thought. In order to get past that, we have to identify an ideal. And the ideal is liberty. Now keep in mind, A good ideal is not actually feasible. It is something that is not actually possible. It gives you a goal for which you can continuously strive, something which will cause you to always be building a better society and a better self to occupy that society. Now, liberty would be the state of being where everyone is free to make their own rational choices without fear of interference from others, as long as said choices don't interfere with others. And that's where this becomes unrealistic. People will always come into conflict. We won't always have the same goals. And when we come into conflict, there's going to have to be some means of resolving it. But if everyone is dedicated to the ideal of liberty, then we can understand why it is people are making choices that are contrary to what we would choose, contrary to what we would make. And we can apply a rational standard to judge whether or not those actions are socially appropriate, whether or not we should tolerate them. Equality makes a very poor ideal. In order for equality to be an ideal, you have to eradicate, you have to absolutely eliminate people's rational choice. You have to dictate to people who are in society what they're supposed to be feeling. That is tyranny. That is unacceptable. So in answer to your question, what about equal guilt? I don't find that to be either relevant or coherent. You're just asking, why not tyranny? Why not dictate to people how they're supposed to feel? Why not dictate to people how they're supposed to order their lives? You're telling me, as a man, I should have the courtesy to not get on an elevator if I see that there's a woman in there. I should preemptively feel guilt for the discomfort she may preemptively experience. Why would I bother talking to women at all? If they want to talk to me, they'll make the first move. They'll give me permission to talk to them. Would you consider that equality? But as I said, I believe equality makes a very poor ideal. I think that such irrational situations, the scenario I just described, would be the exact consequence of applying equality to the way people feel, making equality an ideal. No, liberty is the ideal. And the only questions concerning equality that are relevant are those that feed over to that ideal. Now, perhaps you can supply, perhaps someone here in the comments section or in a video reply will provide a better ideal, something more rational, something that better serves the interest of a secular society that values everyone. But the kind of equality that you're describing, that you've asked me about, John, no, I don't think that will do any good.